Hello, David Snowpeck here from Snowpeck Games, and today I'm going to take a trip down memory lane. This is pure nostalgia. I'm going to talk about LibKSD and SAGElib, which were like game framework, game library, game engine things that I worked on in between the years 2000 and 2003. So I've done game development in some form or fashion for a long time, even longer ago than the year 2000, but most of it has been lost. I just don't have it anymore. But these two things I do have because I posted them to SourceForge as open source. And for those who don't know, SourceForge was like the GitHub or GitLab of back in the day, where lots of open source projects were hosting their projects. So I was going for a walk this morning and thinking about this code, and I thought I just got to go and check it out. So I went on SourceForge, which here's this wonderful SourceForge page, and was like, all right, I got to check out this code. And the code is in CVS. And I'm like, I'm not going to learn how to use CVS again. That's so useless. That's, for those who don't know, CVS is like like Git or Subversion, but from way back in the day. Nobody uses it anymore. But the code's still there. So I went through the process of importing the CVS repo into Git, put it up on GitLab, thinking like, okay, now I'll have it on GitLab, so 20 years from now, when I want to look back at this again, it'll be easier for me to get to, unless, I guess 20 years from now, GitLab might be ancient and nobody will be using Git anymore or something, who knows. But I got it up there, and I started poking around, and I'm thinking, well, now that I have the code, I have to run it, right? Like, I can't just look at the code. I got to see, does it still work? Can I make it work? And it was crazy. So I had to get all of these like really old dependencies. So it's built with scons 0.90, which of course scons is still around. It's the build system that's used by Godot. So the project is still going strong, but like I couldn't even find the 0.90 release on the normal scons page. I had to find it in some totally other different place. I couldn't get it to run with modern Python, with Python 2.7. So I had to grab Python 2.1, which I think is from 2001. And this libsigc, which also is still like a maintained project, but you can't find the 1.2 release, which I needed on their main webpage. So I had to dig all this stuff out, got it all set up, compiled the project, and everything segfaulted. And then I started thinking like, nobody had 64-bit machines. I'm sure there's all sorts of assumptions in this code about 32-bit machines. So, I grabbed the 32-bit version of Ubuntu 18.04 and got that running. And the code actually works. Like most of the demos will run. So that was super cool. Let me show you some of them. They are not very interesting. Again, I'm warning you, this is just for my nostalgia. The things I was doing, the code I was writing back, in 2000 through 2003 isn't useful. Don't try and use it. But it's interesting to me, particularly the fact that some of the things I was building and the way I was doing them is, not that different than like Godot is now, except Godot is done like actually good, right? Anyway, so let's check out some of these demos. I apologize for the screen being all tiny and weird here. Part of that, once I start this, you'll see is that the resolution I was using for these demo apps is super tiny, and part of it is I just had trouble getting Ubuntu to size well in my VM. Anyway, there's this particle simulation demo, because all new game programmers have to make their own particle system thing, and it doesn't do much. You just click it, and things go. I think you can also press K. Yeah, K to just randomly spawn some particles. And they go and they, run out of energy eventually. And this was just, I think, to test like the drawing primitives and, the sort of like main loop type stuff. I don't know, just a fun, dumb little demo. What else have I got? Oh, this font test. So the engine supported TTF fonts via SDLTTF. And then also this like bitmap font format called S-Font. When I was looking through the code, I'm like, what the hell is S-Font? Did I make that up? But I didn't. It turns out that that was some sort of thing that I guess was going around the games-ternet at the time. And here's the webpage for it on linuxgames.com/sfont. Projects that use S-Font actually even includes libKSD, my little game framework. But it was, this handful of files, like you could just add this tiny sfont.c 4K to your project and have bitmap fonts. And I guess I took that and adapted it for my project. But anyway, let's go to this font test. So the way this works is you can type some stuff, and then press the arrow keys to mess with the font properties, like changing the font, another font, and I think this is a bitmap font. I think that's one of those S fonts, and that's of course a TTF font because that is super TTF looking. But you can just mess with different fonts and put them in there, and I don't think you can do it here. That's in the next demo. So this is just fonts. This other demo is using the widget library that existed in my game engine. Like I had a whole GUI toolkit built for it, which includes a rich text editor. Like, okay, so here I could just type in here, what is up? Hi. You can select text, delete it, place the cursor, and you can't do it in here because I didn't put the UI for it, but this uses the same font stuff as that previous font test. So like if I had controls for it, you could, change the size, the color, bold, italic, which font it was or whatever inside this dumb WYSIWYG editor. Why did I make a WYSIWYG editor? I mean, I guess like eventually you'll need it. I had in my mind that I was going to make like online multiplayer role-playing games. So like that's, I guess, where the focus on UI came from. So I guess I would have needed that probably maybe at some point. And here you can adjust the scroll type. So this is like a scroll type that puts scroll bars like on the four corners. And I think there was even like joystick binding for that. Another scroll type is scroll bars. Again, all of this stuff is like from my game library. So it's just drawing the pixels on the screen and looking for the mouse and maintaining its own idea of focus and selection and all of that stuff, to have, some scroll bar controls that can be combined with any panel. This bevel thing, because there's, this generic bevel can be attached to any panel. And again, it's, just drawing that. The color changes the color of this button when I hit it. Buffering, you press it and everything goes away. I think that was supposed to enable and disable the double buffering support built into the engine, which I guess doesn't work anymore. Or maybe I broke it in like one of my last commits to the project, because I'm not running this off of like the last release that I made of it. This is just like the latest stuff that was in CVS when I went to go check it out this morning. So anyway, this whole GUI toolkit, which I mean, is not that dissimilar to the way that Godot does stuff, because I use this signal library, the libsigs C++, which I think was actually from GTK-, which was a C++ wrapper to the GTK library from back in the day. I don't know if that's still around, but it, is a way to do generic typed signals in C++, and so everything, is got some signals that you bind your code to it, and works as sort of normal modern way. I just can't believe I built a WYSIWYG editor. Like, what the heck was I doing? Another one of these demos that actually runs is this image view one, which isn't very interesting. It just loads an image. And I guess it must be doing something with the joystick, because we're getting all this log output from the joystick. But this is just an image, as far as I know, which is an image of a different demo, which doesn't currently work, which sucks, because it was of all the demos, it was the most that seemed like an actual application. This one circle would be your like cursor, and you would crash it into these colors, and then it would turn the cursor into drawing that color, and then you could come over here and like press the gamepad button to like plot and draw things. And then I guess I just took a screenshot of that, which is what this image view is showing. And I think if you crashed into the square, it would turn you into drawing squares instead of drawing circles. So it was like, I don't know, almost a kind of draw application. but that's not working. I commented the whole thing out like in the code. If I come up in here, I just like wrap the whole thing in like if hash if 0 and then end if, and got rid of the whole thing. So it must not have worked in the end. So that sucks, because that would have been a really cool demo. And then there was an OpenGL demo, which also doesn't work. It just segfaults. Yeah, segfaults. But that would have been really cool, because what that was, if I'm remembering correctly, is it had a spinning cube in the background, and then it just overlaid on like the right-hand side some of those GUI controls, some of the UI stuff that I'd made, where you would have some buttons and you would hit those buttons and it would change like the shading and the color on the cube. Which was interesting because I wanted to make 3D games too. And then so I'm going to make the 3D games. I'm going to take this 2D GUI toolkit and overlay it, and then you could have your UI around it. And that I remember being interesting to implement, because this is all using SDL. So normally you'd get like a surface or whatever the heck they called it in SDL from SDL to just start drawing to. And then when you wanted to do it in OpenGL, you'd have to mess around with like getting a texture from OpenGL and drawing to that instead. And my library had to have the idea of like swappable surface types. You could have this normal surface type and this OpenGL surface type. So I don't know. And if you go, maybe because I'm talking about it so much, I'll just show what's in the OpenGL demo. You have like where it creates a panel, sets its size, sets its bevel type, sets a background color, makes a list of buttons, attaches them all on there. You have these on press signals which you connect to, and then those go to callback methods in here that do the things. Like this one changes whether the cube shading is true or false. Not entirely sure what that does. And I guess, just changing the bevel type, and this one's changing the color. And then, down here, of course, on, I guess, draw is what I was calling the process kind of function that was run every frame. It's just, doing the OpenGL stuff, which I guess I copy and pasted from some demo that does the spinning cube. So yeah, like those are all the demos. Some of the kind of interesting things in here, I created this like plugin system where you would like essentially have a C++ interface, and then you could add some implementations to that interface, and then a system to like dynamically load shared objects. So like .sos or .dlls in Windows, and I pulled in a library from somewhere, which theoretically could load dynamic libraries from like a ton of systems I didn't even have access to. No, this isn't it. This is like build artifacts. Where's the actual code? Yeah, what systems could it do? Maybe I can't even see in here. But it was like, BOS and like crazy stuff that I didn't even have. With the idea that, you'd have these different plugins that the engine could pull in, which is kind of like GD native in Godot, but of course totally undeveloped and terrible. Oh, and there's Python bindings. If you actually go look at the code, which please don't look at the code. There's, some Python bindings for the engine, which I don't think are complete. They look pretty incomplete. Like I was just kind of basically getting them to work and didn't get much further. But I think I kind of had the idea that the core engine would be in C++, but then you would actually script it to make your games in Python, again, like Godot GD script. And yeah, the other library is this SAGElib, which I didn't mess with. I didn't try to mess with the Python bindings either. I just sort of poked at them. But this was like going to be, so my idea at the time was that LibKSD was like the low-level thing, and SAGElib was going to be the high-level thing, and I called it like the scene actor game engine. That's what SAGE stands for. So we would have scenes and actors, and the idea was it was going to be like network first. I think the idea was like it would build up, these scenes and actors, and even when you were running the game locally, it would kind of have it separated into like a client server thing. So like, the game would be running the server, but then the client would actually just be part of the same old process anyway, and they'd be talking to each other with the idea that, like, when this went all crazy MMORPG, you'd have the server be in some third location and then a bunch of different clients connecting in or something, I think, maybe. And this I don't think got very far. I poked around in here a little bit, and I think it was just like some XML formats and like some boilerplate like message passing kind of stuff. And then this designer is actually like an editor type thing for editing animations. I guess the engine had some like concept of animations that could be applied to the actors, and then it had this editor which was implemented in WX Windows, or WX Widgets it's called now, the Python bindings to it. So you would have this like app, and I didn't try to run any of this. This might actually be easier to get to run than all of the crap I went through earlier, maybe, I don't know. But from my memory of this really didn't get very far developed. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say. I just had a lot of fun today looking back at some of the game development stuff that I was doing like 20 years ago. When I go into, where's the GitLab thing? I'll go back to LibKSD. When it says last update 19 years ago, that just feels so weird to see. And like, I clearly had some interesting and good-ish ideas back then, but I wasn't a very good programmer. This is like one of the first times I was attempting to create like a library or a framework at kind of a high level, and I didn't do a very good job of it. But I don't know. It's also interesting to see like the kernel of some of the same kind of ideas that went into Godot, maybe because they're just obviously good ideas and whatever. But I don't know. Yeah. If anyone else wants to share some of their old, ancient game development works and things from way back in the day, I'd love to see that. I wish I had more of the things I had from back in the day. As far as I know, I never made any like real legitimate games with LibKSD or SAGElib. Of course, I made more game-ish things that were individual units, smaller in scope, not trying to create a whole game engine. But yeah, anyway, that's all I've got. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.